Hello everybody and welcome to a new webinar. Our topic today is Touching Circles, how systemic insights and answers can help in family search, genealogy and ancestry. My name is Tom Wittig and I will be your host again, and I will lead you through the topic today. This webinar is available in English for those who want to participate in other geographies, and also in German for those who are located in the German-speaking areas or who have roots in the German-speaking areas. So this is a parallel webinar and offerings in that regard. Here's what I'd like to cover today. This webinar is a first introduction, so it's a kickoff webinar for the topic of touching circles. And I would first like to give a little bit more of a context. So what is this topic all about? And I will talk a bit more about the relationship and interplay between information and intuition. And then we will talk more about the white space on the family tree. So some of you saw that in the previous announcement, so I will expand on that a little bit more. And then I would like to talk about an example. So what we mean by that, that word of systemic insights. And I will give an outlook of about what to expect in the upcoming contributions in this series, and then we will have a short time today for a brief Q&A. Oftentimes it starts with a family photo album, like in this quote from a participant from an earlier seminar. I'd like to read that really quickly. So she said, while I was cleaning up, I found an old family photo album, and I was captivated by the story of my grandmother. We look very much alike, and our path in life is very similar. There were certain inconsistencies and mysteries in our family. I explored the open questions, and it moved me and had a profound impact. This is a very common feedback that we get when we do these kind of seminars and webinars, on when people start working in the systemic context on family history and family search. And what we often encounter when we talk about the touching circles is once the work is in motion and I explore a different path, and I do that with an open heart and open mind, then oftentimes one thing leads to another. And we find ourselves that we discover more and more. And it's also a very interesting experience. So first of all, it's all about connecting people, events, locations, and the path in life that people take. And sometimes we find similarities or interesting patterns also from generation to generation. And it often is the case that one discovery and one insight leads to another set of discoveries. And therefore, it's very important to be aware of what's happening and also have, let's say, train our intuition and train our awareness. And last but not least, the most profound impact we see that it's a deeply touching experience for everybody involved, oftentimes for the searcher or researcher in the family, but also those who are impacted and then who learn about new insights. And that has a profound impact for oftentimes the entire big family. So also what we can say is that the search for family and for family members is a basic human need in our basic human existence. And that's often the case that there's a certain point in time when people start asking, okay, where do we come from? Where does this family come from? Where are our roots? Where did our ancestors come from? How did we get here? How did they, for example, migrate, immigrate, or emigrate from a specific region to another one? And what did that mean for the entire family? And there are many, many rich stories about that, as we can tell. It's not only so that in today's time we see a big migration around the world, but there have been big waves of migration before, of course. And the dilemma for those who are searching and researching families is often that the relatives and the ancestors are not there anymore. So they are not alive anymore, and sometimes we don't have the stories documented that they have been telling. Sometimes, even in family, it is the case that people do not like to talk about certain aspects or certain topics in developments in families. And on the more, let's say, rational mind side, often the information is also missing or fragmented. And when we start exploring a family as a system of the present family, the family of origin, the ancestors, and everything that belongs to the family and the movement, and often we find that it goes far beyond the factual information. And the information can lead us and give us important insights, but also the stories that we hear from the ancestors are very important. But we can complement that with the intuition and the systemic context. And what I mean by that, I will explain in a few moments here. But that gives us a more complete picture and a richer experience of what really happened in our family situation and how it relates to other families also. That's another aspect of what we find in the Touching Circle seminars, that once a topic is coming up, many people say, wow, that's exactly what happened in our family. And I'm really surprised that it comes up here in a very different work, for example, in a system constellation, for example. Also, what we can say, it's all about relationships and the dynamic movement over time, so through time and different location and spaces. And at the end of it, it's all about, I would call it a greater love, a love that is bringing people together and that is seeking for bringing a whole system, a family system together. And so moving the parts and the members of the family system closer together. So there is also no contradiction. It's actually the case that the factual information and the, let's say, the systemic work are dependent on each other. So the factual information, the systemic insights go together with the hints and the signs that we receive when we are looking for certain aspects or phenomena in our family system. And therefore, it's necessary also to look after, let's say, the rational side, the family information, but also to go after the systemic insights and discover the family movement from a very different perspective. And that actually takes us into a very different field, as we call it, or a different dimension. So the information, intuition really go together also with the experience, and they augment and enrich each other. So one is dependent on the other, and that's something we have to keep in mind. It's not that there is a competition between, let's say, the genealogist and the system constellator, for example. They have to work together in order to provide a complete picture. And oftentimes we see that certain aspects are confirmed or something is revealed that the other side couldn't see predominantly. And that's important. That happens actually very often. Now, a word about the systemic field. When we talk about the field, then what we mean by that is that in any given family, it contains the knowledge and the wisdom of the family and the ancestors. And often it is revealed through peculiar events and developments, and sometimes what we call coincidences. But then if we look at it with an open eye and mind and heart, we find that we are led from one discovery to another. So sometimes this cannot be really coincidence. So if we entrust ourselves in this field and the movement in this field, then we can make important discoveries for ourselves and for our other fellow family members, of course. But along with that, there are a few questions that we have to keep in mind. So first is, how can we approach such a family system or family of origin and the ancestors in a very mindful and also respectful way, so that we don't do damage, don't harm ourselves and others. And secondly, how can we enter such a dimension or such a field in a different level, so that we can gain access to these insights? And the third question is, what do we need to observe? So what are the orders and the let's say the laws that are in play that we have to consider and respect, of course. And then once we have the insights, what does it mean? How are we going to deal with it? How are we dealing with even challenging information about entanglements or certain dynamics and patterns that we see over time? And for those who are in a position to serve and help others, for example, the genealogist, or others, for example, system constellators who are working with clients and family or family businesses sometimes, how can we do this in a way that we really help the other person in a most respectful way? So that is an important question. Now, when we go back to the family tree, the most current knowledge we have, of course, about ourselves. So I find myself with the knowledge about my life and that of my parents. Usually, we have some form of knowledge. Some people more than others. Some people do not have any knowledge about their parents. But then if we go into the next generation, it's starting to fade out already. When we talk about our grandparents, there could be even missing information where somebody there was, for example, a previous partner. So that's an important information. And the further we go back, the more it fades out, of course, and the less we will know about our ancestors and families of origin. And that's an important fact that we have to keep in mind. Not all the knowledge is available, but oftentimes the things that happened in the past still resonate in our families. And we see that in many families, for example, who have been impacted by war, relocation, and other very serious events over time. And we see that these events still play an important role in the families here and now and today. Going into back to this specific example from a seminar in the topic of touching circles, we oftentimes deal with a fairly complex family situation. That's very normal. So our client could be, let's say, here on this part of the family tree as a child of the parents, who had grandparents and so on. But there could be also things happening in a very different part of the family. And that's what we mean by the white space now of the family tree, because there are some areas where something is missing. For example, here is an ancestor missing, or in another part we have unborn children or deceased children, in this case, for example, twins that died actually in an early age. There could be children who were born outside a marriage, for example. Everybody has a place on this family tree and in the family system. And that's something that we often forget when we talk about family systems and families of origin, that everybody who is part of the family has a place and wants to be seen and recognized in the family. And of course, we know that this is not always the case. But it's not only about missing people. Could be also somebody in our direct line. So, for example, this grandfather was married to his first wife who passed away. And that would then, of course, be the biological grandmother in this line here. It's an important information that we have, of course, sometimes. But oftentimes there are other things that happen. For example, challenging relationship between two people in the same family. And these are things which can have also severe consequences over generations, of course, especially if these issues were not resolved and these entanglements were not resolved over time. So it is important to give everybody a space and also see everything that the way it is or the way it was, without any judgment, without any curiosity. And that's important. But more importantly, we're not talking here about a family tree or a genogram or something like that. We're talking at the end of the day about people. And so in the systemic work that we often do in for example, with family constellations, is that we set up a family in a family constellation in order to take a look at the let's say the challenges or the hidden dynamics in a family. So in this particular case, we chose representatives for the client, the grandmother, and then the other relatives, which is the mother-in-law of the grandmother. And they had a very challenging relationship. And also the missing person here played an important role. I don't want to go into the details on the approach and how we came to this particular constellation, but it's important to keep the systemic perspective in mind. And that's why I document it this way, to make here the connection between the information that we have about the family, the factual information, and also the movement and the constellation and the relationships between people. And the systemic experience, so when we go into this constellation, we make a very different and profound experience. And sometimes it's important also to change the perspective and to start initiating a new movement, especially when there are, let's say, open wounds that did not get a chance to heal over time. And often what we find is that when we find a solution, then the love can proceed again and flow forward. And a lot of interesting things happen as a result of that in families. So in other words, when the circles close, and we discover the circles, and when they close and we experience this closing, then we experience it as a fulfilling and often as a healing movement, not only for ourselves, but for other members in the family or in our relationships. And that's something that is very profound. And that's where this double or multiple meaning comes from, of touching circles. These circles basically connect, but they also touch us in a very profound manner, in a very profound way. So what is there to consider when we do this systemic work? It's not that we can go somewhere in an archive and look for information. Instead, we are going into a different field, a different dimension. For example, through guided meditations to get us in resonance. And I would like to give a few aspects here. One is it's better to work under the guidance of an experienced and trained facilitator. And it's also important to know and to familiarize oneself with the systemic orders, so the orders and laws that are inherent in a systemic situation, and that basically then also determine the entanglements that we have there. More importantly, it's also key that we consider the attitude, the inner attitude of the constellation leader, the client, the participants, and especially those who serve others. For example, the genealogist, but also the people who are involved in this family constellation. And that's why it's a learning experience for everybody involved. And one of the key questions is always to ask, specifically when we work about topics in ancestry or families of origin, what can belong to the here and now? What has a meaning and implication for the here and now? And what remains in the past? So what do we leave in the past? A very important consideration that I cannot emphasize enough. Okay, so that was the introduction of the topic today. I'd like to give a brief outlook about what to expect in other forms. So as I said, this is set up as a blended learning experience consisting of webinars, seminars, and online courses, which you can combine in a different way. But a blended learning experience means that we combine elements of let's say online teaching, for example, or guided meditations, which you can use in your daily work or your daily life, but also with seminars, teachings, and also where we work on concrete situations with family topics to enhance and enrich our experience and knowledge. And the topics are, for example, the systemic orders and the fundamental laws that we need to keep in mind and consider, the approach that we're taking, the attitude, also the attitude of the client is also very important. Sometimes when we see that there is a challenging situation with the attitude of the client for certain reasons, then I would, for example, refuse to work with the client. In an extreme case, right? But it's more about really helping clients to find a good way forward in these matters. Then we will talk about what to consider, the entanglements and hidden dynamics, but also about transgenerational phenomena that we often see. And this whole topic is basically a joint learning experience, which is living also from the exchange of information and experiences and from the question and answer about concrete topics that move us or move the certain participants here. Okay, how can you stay connected? Well, there's the YouTube channel, and as you've seen, I'm often publishing videos on the YouTube channel. And when I publish videos, I'm not showing participants of the seminars or webinars for privacy reasons. And I'm usually only showing the teachings or the speeches that I'm giving about a certain topic, or let's say I'm doing a report in terms of a documentation about a certain topic. Then there's a Facebook group. So the Facebook page, if you search for Constellateur, as it's written here with a C, and the group Touching Circles, that is connected to this page here. So that's a group for exchange. It's a closed group where you can have access, and there the deal is that we exchange information about this topic, and it's a learning group if you want. The website is constellation.wittigonia.net, and the email list you can find here. There's the that's the way we'll be announce the upcoming seminars. If you want to get in touch and inquire about let's say speeches, or if you want to host an event or suggest topics, etc., please contact us at constellations@wittigonia.net. Okay, so that's it for the part today. I would like to take maybe a couple of questions only today, and then there will be more in the upcoming webinar. Okay, so let's see who we have online. And I should say also that questions can be submitted upfront by the time where you register for the webinar, or you can actually submit them in the Facebook group, where I'm going to pick them up and answer them live here also in the webinar. Okay, so there's one question which was submitted upfront from a participant, which I'd like to go back to. And that question was about the specific family situation. So the person here says, we have a lot going on in our family, and I'm just beginning to scratch on the surface. How can I proceed in this work with the systemic view that you said? Well, one way to do it, of course, is to participate in family constellation seminars. So we are hosting a few of those, and you want to take a look at the calendar for next year. Another one is the webinar and the series that we have started here. It's not a direct personal experience, but we can still work on these topics and exchange information, and also give some advice on how to proceed. And of course, there is an upcoming live course, an online course, which you can find on the homepage. And probably in the next webinar, I'll talk more about that, what to expect in that live course. And I will put the links to all of this in the session notes. So check out the video on the YouTube channel. There you have all the web links to the collateral material and courses. Okay. So the other question that I had submitted here up front is, can we submit questions to this group about personal experiences? And I would say yes, by all means. Of course, you need to decide how much information you want to reveal about the family. So I would always advise not to share any, let's say, personally identifiable information as a general rule of thumb. But you can, of course, and that's the whole purpose of the series, to share and explore the topics together. So by all means, please participate also in the next webinars and in the discussion groups. So we'll be very happy to have you here. Okay, so then there's a question from which was submitted in the previous webinar. As I mentioned, I'm giving this webinar in 2 languages. So for now, it's English and German. And somebody in the German exchange, she asked, who should we bring to a seminar in the family constellation? Should I bring the entire family? And the answer to that question is a very common question. The answer is no, you don't have to bring the family, not even the people who are involved. It's oftentimes just enough if you come yourself, and then we will work with the topic and the information in a very specific way, how we work in family constellations. But it's not necessary to bring the entire family. It is, of course, up to you if you want to invite people to make the experience. Then you're most welcome to bring the people along, of course. Okay, so yeah, I think that's it for today for the kickoff. So I would like to thank everybody for participating today, and watch out for the next webinar. So this kickoff we will probably repeat 1 or 2 more times next week, and then the plan is that we will have regular webinars, but also some sharing in the Facebook community. So sign up, and I'm looking forward to welcome you there as well. Take care. Goodbye.